Joining me at the Roundtable to discuss the emotional toll of what has been one of the most intense and divisive election cycles in our history are Dr. Candice Norcott, Associate Professor at the University of Chicago, and licensed psychologist Dr. Nneka Onyezia. Nice to see you both again. Yes. Thank you for coming back.
Thanks for having us.
I have to say, it has been a roller coaster of a cycle. You know, we had a candidate, then that candidate dropped out, and then we had a new candidate, and we're all excited. And I have to say, even myself have been really stressful. And even, you know, on the Republican side, you know, their candidate had was a couple of assassination attempts. So how do we go about unpacking and processing, particularly these last 24, 48 hours have been particularly intense? Dr. Norcott, start with you.
Well, one place that I've started is not assuming that everybody feels the same. Yeah. And that when you're talking to somebody about the impact of the outcome, that they're going to feel the same way. So I think that's been pretty helpful, because it's going to range from joy and happiness to fear and sadness and grief. And so part of it is kind of sitting back and seeing, you know, from my clinical professional lens, like in my clinic work, just kind of hearing where people are and not making assumptions, because it's going to be a range. Right,
that's a great point. I'm going to come back to that for a second. Nneka, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the range of emotions is definitely important. I think that one of the things that's also important is to give yourself permission to feel a range of emotions. Some people are feeling rage, and some people are feeling apathy, and it's really important to understand that all of those feelings are valid, that you can really validate yourself and saying, like, you know what, it's okay that I feel this way, but then to also remember that it's temporary. Your feelings are going to change over time, and none of those feelings mean that you have to act or do something right now. That it's important to give yourself time to experience those feelings, to figure out what would be your plan of action moving forward, and not feel like you have to do something knee-jerk right away.
Right. Oh. Great point. I want to circle back to you, because I think the point you raised about not everybody feels the same. You know, some people, more than 50% of us are kind of happy. So when you do have that, and for the people who are kind of really depressed about it, it's a challenge. So how do we, on both sides, recognize and accept what are some skills we can have to not, kind of just reject somebody else's who's feeling so differently, because that can create its own tension, right?
Well, one of the, I think, things that have gotten us to where we are is loneliness and separation and division. And part of how we're going to recover is going to be connection, understanding, and our shared humanity. And so I think creating more other is not going to be helpful. And so it's going to be really tempting to say other, them, and see people as dehumanized. But I think after, after we kind of crawl out and start to digest what happened, to really watch our thoughts around, are we othering as we're taking care of ourselves? Does that mean that we're isolating, or does that mean that we're taking care of ourselves, but also understanding that we're still part of a community, a national community, a global community? So it's complicated and it's not easy, but I do think that it's through connection that we're going to be able to kind of come back and see this like shared humanity thing. It's very pie in the sky, but it's what I'm holding on to right now.
Yeah, I think it's, in a perfect universe, it's what you want. I think the challenge is, and I've heard this, from several people today, I think a lot of the people who were supporters of Vice President Harris just don't get it, right? They just, it's not just other, it's just like, I just don't get where you're coming from. And we, even when you talk about it, I still don't get it. And so how do we, is there a pathway to find a place there to, forgive, get comfortable with, accept a perspective that you just simply don't understand?
Well, that's tough, and it's not fast work. It's not quick work. It's something that does take a long time. And it does take having curiosity and moving from trying to debate and convince to moving to trying to understand. I think that that's, you kind of mentioned, like, you just don't get it. I think that when people start to think about it, like, okay, well, why do you have those views? How did your life experiences shape those views? What kind of values do you have that we maybe share in common but express themselves in a different way for you because of your life? I think once we get to that point of curiosity, then people can have conversations about really difficult topics, because you're not going into it with the goal of, I want to make you see the same or feel the same way I do. It's more I want us to understand each other.
That's great. Many of us have children. My kids are adults, but they're young adults, and they were traumatized. And I had to talk to them last night. Talk to them again this morning. But also I think anybody, teens and up paying attention, her kind of the language and the discussion. How do we talk? Do you have some thoughts about how parents should think about talking to their children about this election and about how we move forward with a president who had been during the course of the election pretty negative about his opponent and other people. So how do we talk to them about, because he said things that generally we tell children not to, that adults shouldn't, and they shouldn't say.
Right.
There's a piece where, he is exposing so many people to so many children to things that we would want to hide or shelter them from early on in their years, and now they're getting exposed and having to reckon with. And so you can join them in talking about how to respond. So when somebody acts inappropriately, offends us, how do we respond? And so you can create like shared opportunities for learning about history, learning about collective activism, in an age-appropriate way, learning about how you come together to support the things that you feel passionately about. So it's about understanding the impact. Yes, this is hurtful. Yes, this has an impact. And how do we respond in a healthy way? I think that's a helpful discourse and a place to be with kids and with families.
So an opportunity to have an important conversation. Nneka, you agree
I
with
was going to add on to what you're saying, that I think that one of the things we've seen in both of these election cycles where Trump was a president or was a candidate was that a lot of young people are repeating things they hear. They're repeating what they hear their parents say. They're repeating things that they heard on the news. And they don't necessarily have the background to even understand or form an opinion of their own. So I think part of those conversations that we have with teenagers and even younger children is, okay, but why don't you like Trump? Right? Maybe you've heard me or your father or aunt and uncle say negative things about Donald Trump, but let's really kind of think about what are the issues, what are the values that we hold, what are the things that really shape those opinions versus just focusing on the emotion, the negative emotional reaction to his name or his candidacy.
So I think it's also a great opportunity, to remind people that just because we disagree doesn't mean we have to demonize, right? I think that's, unfortunately, it was a big factor in the campaign, but I think part of trying to get through this is trying to minimize that conversation. It's very easy, I fall into it myself, right? Sure. It is very easy to say, well, if you support that candidate, there must be something wrong with you. I can't get there. So is that, an important opportunity to look at ourselves, Candice, you think?
Today?
Maybe not today.
Yeah, right.
Maybe not today.
Right, so today, take care of yourself, right? Today, just try to hug your loved ones. I think the point about not making any big decisions, nothing has to happen today other than you just acknowledge how hard this is. Right. And then you can reflect and say, how do I not look at people as evil, right? Because the person that voted for Trump is still in some cases, right? The person that voted for Trump, right, is still the person that is
family member,
right? Is family, is the person that is making your coffee and saying a hello to you, and we're not going to get through this and potentially maybe be healthier for it in some future world by having vitriol and hate for each other because of the way we voted.
Yeah. I yesterday, it was kind of over the course of the week because it was kind of as the election was coming, but yesterday in particular, I was wound so tight. And then last night, I was really physically did not feel well.
Yeah.
What are signs we should be looking for in ourselves, and that our anxiety is maybe we need to really start focusing and take a step back? Nneka, what should be? Are there signals that people should say, hey, if you're here, you need to take a second and take a break?
Absolutely. I mean, I think so much of it does have to do with checking in with your body.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we end up being programmed to ignore different signs, like, okay, I have aches and pains, or I'm tired all the time, or I can't sleep. We end up ignoring those, and we kind of sometimes feel like we have to just push through, right? Well, I have to do this thing, I have to keep going. I think that when you get to the point where you're constantly pushing through, you're constantly feeling like you're tired, you can't really move, you're starting to feel these different ailments, or like you're not eating, you're not sleeping, you're isolating yourself, you don't want to talk to anybody. All of these are signs that mean, hey, I need to check in with myself and make a change, possibly. Sometimes they're just signs that you're going through something tough. And so that point about today is really important, because those signs don't necessarily mean that something's clinically wrong. Hurry up, go see a psychologist right away, right? Sometimes those signs mean I need a nap, or I need to not skip lunch, or I need to, unplug from social media, right? So those physical signs, I really think, are the first, bit of evidence that you need to do something different.
Right. I think your point about self-care and just take a minute, because stress can be exhausting, right? And you don't even realize it until you just realize how exhausted you are. Do you think, what about, I found, I had different, people had different responses, right? Different people, some people were watching every map and every change on the map every step of the way. Other people were turning it off. Do you think if for people for whom it's been a very particularly stressful, maybe it's time to turn off the maps, turn off maybe some of the social media feeds you're getting, and just take a little break, and including not just quiet time, but also just screen time?
Well, I think it's a common recommendation for psychologists to take a break from social media and to take a break from screens, and activate different parts of your brain. Reading fiction, reading anything else other than the news, talking to people, interacting. Those things just light up different parts of your brain and get you engaged socially, which we know it just influences your well-being. And watching TV, watching your screen is a very singular activity. It's very, it doesn't feel isolating because it feels maybe like we're plugged in, but it is a very solo activity. So anything that gets you kind of engaged in other and like in community, I think is a positive shift for many people. And turning off the news feed, like absolutely. I just can't, I want to say again, take a break from the screen.
Yeah. You
Absolutely, and I think that with a lot of teenagers, right? Like Candice said, this is a common recommendation, but a lot of times people don't really want to hear it because it's a habit, it's a pattern, it's what you're used to. I work with many teenagers who say, this is how I go to sleep at night, right? This is my routine. And so a lot of times the way that I get people to really look at it is to think about, well, how do you feel after? And I think that's really the key, right? To actually create this mindful experience of, okay, I've looked at screens, I've done the doom scrolling, right? That we all do at different times, right? How do I feel afterwards? Do I feel better? Do I feel fulfilled? Do I feel more connected? Or do I actually feel, okay, I just wasted 30 minutes? Or do you feel like, oh, I should have done this and this and this, but I just went into this mindless bubble? So I think that checking in with yourself at those points too is helpful.
Okay. All right, well, you guys have given great counsel. For people who are really feeling stressed and strained right now, are there resources? Where can they go right now? Do you have resources that they can turn to, a site or?
Yeah, so NAMI is a great resource, National Alliance of Mental Illness. Their website has resources for election stress and they have general hotlines. And so that would be, I think that's a very good hub to send people. There's always the 988 crisis line for people that need help in the moment, and that's a talker. And even the NAMI has like a chat function as well.
Okay, well, terrific. Well, you guys have been really terrific, and thank you so much. As always, the council has been great, and I think particularly today, really important. So thank you again, Candice and Nneka, for being here with us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
On the other side of the break, CanTV's Executive Director, Darius Hillman, will join us for the last word. Stay with us.